Commander Elias Marlowe sat in the cockpit of the Odyssey, staring at the strange planet below. Its surface shimmered in shades of violet and green, clouds swirling in patterns that seemed almost alive. He had charted countless worlds before, but there was something about this one that felt different, almost sentient. Sensors reported unusual energy readings emanating from the surface, readings that didn't match any known physics. The mission was simple on paper: explore, make contact if possible, and report back. In practice, it felt like stepping into a dream where reality had bent into something alien. The ship descended through the thick atmosphere, buffeted by winds that seemed to carry a faint hum. It wasn't a sound humans could hear. It was more like a vibration in the bones, a resonance that seemed to align with one's heartbeat. Elias adjusted the controls, his eyes narrowing. "Keep it steady," he said to his crew, though he wasn't sure anyone else could feel the subtle pulse in the air. Below them, massive structures rose from the ground like living spires. They glowed faintly from within, as if light traveled along veins just beneath their surfaces. The buildings moved, almost imperceptibly, bending and swaying as though breathing. Elias swallowed hard. The reports had described intelligent life on this planet, but nothing could have prepared him for seeing a city that appeared to grow and think on its own. "Sir, sensors are picking up multiple life forms," said Lieutenant Mara Venn, her voice tense over the intercom. "They're huge, not human size and not animal either. They are complex." Elias leaned forward, squinting through the viewport. The first figures emerged from the shadows of the spires. They were tall, insectoid, yet graceful, their limbs long and segmented, moving in a way that suggested both elegance and strength. Their exoskeletons reflected the dim light, giving them a metallic sheen that made them seem armored and regal at once. The humans aboard the ship felt exposed, fragile, and very small. "Hold your fire," Elias ordered immediately. "We're observers, not intruders, for now." The ship touched down on a platform that seemed designed for them, though no human had ever built it. The floor beneath their feet pulsed gently, matching the rhythm of the world itself. It was as if the planet was alive and it had welcomed them, or at least allowed them to enter. When the airlock opened, Elias stepped out first, his boots pressing lightly against the organic surface. The scent was unfamiliar, a mix of sweet and metallic notes that made the air feel thick yet strangely comforting. Every movement was watched. Hundreds of glowing eyes tracked him, their expressions impossible to read, yet undeniably intelligent. Then he saw her. The alien queen emerged from the center of the hive-like city. She was taller than any human could be, her body a masterwork of alien evolution. Her limbs moved in slow, deliberate arcs, almost dancing, each motion precise yet fluid. Her head was elongated, crowned with delicate filaments that shimmered in the light, and her eyes, large, reflective, molten silver, fixed on Elias with unwavering attention. "Do you think I'm beautiful?" she asked. Her voice wasn't carried through the air but through thought, resonating directly inside Elias' mind. It was a voice that was everywhere and nowhere, gentle yet commanding, curious yet tinged with caution. Elias froze. He had trained for first contact with alien species, but no training had prepared him for a question like this. It wasn't a threat, though it carried weight. It was a challenge, a test. "You're very beautiful," he said finally, choosing honesty. His words sounded almost small compared to the presence of the queen, but he spoke them steadily. For a moment, the queen was silent. Then her mandibles curved in what he interpreted as the closest thing to a smile. It was a gesture so subtle that only a trained observer might notice, yet it carried a warmth that made the hairs on the back of his neck rise. "Interesting," she said. "Few of your kind see more than form, most react with fear. You do not." Elias kept his hands visible, showing no weapon, showing respect, showing that humanity could stand without aggression. The queen observed him for a long time, as though trying to understand not just what he was, but what he represented. Over the next several hours, Elias and his team were guided, though guided implied no force, only subtle influence, through the hive city. Every surface pulsed with life, and every motion seemed deliberate, purposeful, intelligent. The architecture was beyond human comprehension. Floors shifted gently, corridors elongated, and ceilings opened to reveal chambers that seemed infinite. The alien inhabitants watched closely. Some came near, their heads tilting curiously. Others hovered above, wings flickering like living lanterns. None attacked, none fled. All observed. Elias noticed that their eyes weren't just visual organs, they seemed to perceive thoughts, emotions, and intentions. Each gaze weighed him, measured him, catalogued him. The queen led them to a chamber unlike any other. It was vast, with crystalline structures rising from the floor like frozen flames. Light refracted through them in prismatic waves, casting patterns that danced across the walls. The air was thick with energy, and Elias felt the vibrations deep in his chest, as if the room itself were alive. "You will answer questions," the queen said, and this time her voice was audible, though still layered with that resonant thought. "Questions about your kind, about your hearts, about your essence, you must answer truthfully." Elias nodded. "We will do our best." The first questions were simple. "What does loyalty mean to your kind?" the queen asked. Elias thought carefully. "Loyalty is choosing to stand by someone even when fear or doubt tells you to run. It's not blind obedience, it's conscious commitment." She tilted her head. "And fear, how do you overcome it?" "By facing it," Elias said. "By understanding it and acting anyway." "Fear is natural, but inaction is worse. Action defines us." The queen remained silent for a long moment. Then she motioned with a limb and the chamber shifted. Walls extended, floors rotated, and new creatures appeared. Advisors, generals of the hive, tall and imposing, moving with a coordinated precision that suggested intelligence beyond human calculation. They circled Elias and his team, their eyes glowing faintly. Elias felt tension prickling his spine, but he did not draw his weapon. He had learned quickly that force would not serve him here. Instead, he observed, calculated, and engaged. He spoke to them with calm, measured words, appealing to logic, curiosity, and even humor. Each gesture, each carefully chosen sentence seemed to intrigue them, causing subtle shifts in their formation. The queen watched from above, her presence commanding and patient. Every question she asked, every observation she made, seemed designed to probe not just knowledge or strength, but character. Elias realized then that the queen's question about beauty was more than a literal inquiry. It was a probe of understanding, perception, and empathy. As hours turned into a cycle of observation and interaction, Elias felt a strange connection forming. Not with the hive as a whole, but with her, the queen. There was intelligence in her movements, curiosity in her gaze, and a faint hint of something else he couldn't quite name. Trust, recognition, perhaps she was testing if a human could see the layers beneath what was visible. He began to see patterns. The hive responded to emotion, to intention. The crystalline structures pulsed brighter when honesty was spoken, dimmed when hesitation lingered. The queen's advisors reacted to subtle shifts in tone and posture, as though reading energy rather than language. Elias understood that survival here would not come from aggression, cleverness alone, or technology. Survival would come from the ability to understand, adapt, and communicate on a level that transcended species. Humanity was fragile, but perhaps in this fragility lay something remarkable, the capacity for empathy, choice, and courage. By the end of their first cycle within the hive, Elias and his team had learned enough to survive the night. The queen did not offer comfort, but neither did she offer harm. Her question echoed in his mind. "Do you think I'm beautiful?" He realized the answer had been true in multiple layers. Her form, her intelligence, the elegance of her society, the complexity of her thought. And yet, it was not just about her. It was about seeing clearly, understanding, and valuing life beyond instinct or fear, a lesson humans often struggled to remember in their own worlds. When they returned to their temporary quarters, a platform floating above the hive floor, Elias stared out at the luminous city below. He felt a mixture of awe, fear, and excitement. He had encountered civilizations before, yes, but never one that demanded his mind and heart as much as this. He spoke quietly to himself, almost a whisper, though he knew the queen could hear it if she chose. "Yes, you are very beautiful." The words were simple, honest, and deliberate. He had not flinched, he had not embellished. He had seen beyond the surface, and in that acknowledgement he felt something shift, not just in her, but in himself. Humanity, in its raw form, could touch even the most alien mind when it acted with courage, honesty, and perception. As sleep finally claimed him, Elias dreamed of the queen, not as a creature to be feared, but as a being who challenged the limits of understanding. And somewhere deep in the hive, perhaps, she watched him sleep, curious about the human who dared to see her in truth. The next day, Elias awoke to the soft hum of the hive. Light from the crystalline walls seeped into the quarters, shifting in color as though reflecting his mood. He rubbed his eyes, still feeling the lingering pulse of the planet beneath him. Even after hours of rest, he couldn't shake the impression that the hive itself was watching, assessing, and learning from every human movement. Lieutenant Mara then entered quietly, her expression a mix of awe and apprehension. "Sir," she said, "they're ready for us. The Queen has arranged what she calls a trial." Elias nodded, not surprised. He had sensed that the Queen's initial encounter was only a prelude. "We go," he said, "but we must remember, observation is as important as action. They are testing us as much as we are observing them." The group followed a narrow corridor lined with the glowing veins of living walls. The air shimmered faintly, vibrating in resonance with their heartbeat. The further they went, the more the structures seemed to respond to their presence, floor panels rising slightly under their weight, walls tilting, almost guiding them through a path only the hive understood. The creatures lining the corridors watched silently. There were no guards here in the traditional sense, only witnesses to every movement, every glance, every subtle shift in emotion. At the center of the hive, they entered a massive chamber. It was circular, with concentric platforms rising toward the Queen, who sat poised on a throne that seemed to grow from the ground itself. Her silver eyes fixed on Elias, and her presence filled the room without a sound. "The first test," the Queen said, her resonant voice filling their minds, "is not of strength but of mind and heart. You will face scenarios designed to reveal your essence. Choose wisely, act wisely, or fail." Elias glanced at his team. Their expressions were tense yet determined. "Stay calm. We adapt, we observe, we survive," he whispered under his breath, knowing the Queen would hear the words anyway. The chamber shifted. Walls and floors extended, rotated, and reshaped themselves, forming a labyrinth. At first glance, it seemed simple, a maze. But as they moved, the corridors shifted unpredictably. Each wrong turn led to subtle traps, gravity shifts, sudden walls, or strange energy pulses that made the air thick and heavy. The labyrinth was alive, responding to hesitation, doubt, and fear. Elias took a deep breath. "We move with purpose. Watch each other, watch the walls, watch ourselves." They advanced carefully, reading the subtle cues of the environment. Mara noticed that the pulses in the floor reacted to honesty. When she moved confidently, the floor glowed brightly, guiding them. When doubt crept in, it dimmed, making the path ahead uncertain. Hours passed, each corridor presenting a different challenge. At one point, holographic projections of their memories appeared. Elias watched himself as a boy, racing across the fields of his home planet, laughing with his younger sister. He felt the pang of longing but forced himself to step forward. The projections tested emotion. Could he acknowledge his past, his vulnerabilities, and yet act with clarity? At another turn, the maze simulated extreme danger. Walls closing in, floor panels vibrating violently. The Queen's advisors appeared, towering insectoids capable of manipulating gravity within the chamber. Elias realized quickly that brute force was meaningless. Instead, he relied on calm observation and reasoning, directing his team to move in coordinated, precise steps. The labyrinth responded, walls retracting when they acted decisively and intelligently. The Queen watched silently from above, her eyes scanning every reaction, every hesitation, every act of courage. Elias began to understand that this trial was not about tricking them or defeating them. It was about revealing human nature, the strengths, the weaknesses, the choices that define them in critical moments. At one point, Mara stumbled over a shifting floor panel and fell into a low-gravity pit. One of the alien advisors descended, its silver limbs poised to strike. Elias' heart raced, but he did not draw a weapon. Instead, he reached a hand into the pit and called out, "Trust me." The advisor hesitated, its compound eyes studying him. Then, as if understanding, it withdrew slightly. Elias lifted Mara, and the labyrinth responded, opening a safe path forward. "You see clearly, human," the Queen said in his mind. "Most act with fear, you act with comprehension." Elias nodded silently, feeling the weight of her observation. This was more than survival. This was diplomacy, courage, and understanding fused together. Humanity, he realized, could succeed in ways the aliens had never truly encountered, not through raw power, but through choice, intelligence, and moral clarity. By the time they reached the center of the labyrinth, the team was exhausted but unharmed. The queen's throne rose before them, and the crystalline walls pulsed brighter as if acknowledging their success. The trial was over, yet Elias felt it had only just begun. "You have performed well," the queen said aloud. "But this is not the end. The second test is subtler. It is the test of perception, of seeing truth beyond appearances. It is a challenge your kind often fails." Before Elias could ask for clarification, the room shifted again. A chamber opened nearby, filled with bioluminescent flora that reacted to touch and emotion. The plants glowed brighter as the humans moved closer. Their light shifted with the mood of those present. Hesitation caused the glow to fade, confidence made it bloom. Elias knelt, gently touching a glowing petal. It pulsed warmly under his fingers, reflecting the calm he felt despite the alien surroundings. Mara followed, experimenting with movement, laughter, and focus, watching the flora respond. Each member of the team discovered that honesty and intentionality shaped this space, while fear and falsehood caused it to shrink away. "This is the essence of our perception," the queen said, her voice softer now. "Beauty, understanding, and truth are intertwined. You will learn that perception is not passive. It is a choice. To see clearly is to act rightly." Elias realized that the queen's initial question, "Do you think I'm beautiful?" was part of this test. It was never just about appearance. Beauty was connected to understanding, empathy, courage, and intelligence. To recognize beauty meant to see deeply, beyond instinct or superficial impression. The team spent cycles navigating this chamber, learning to act with honesty, to synchronize with one another, and to observe without judgment. Every pulse of light, every reaction from the flora, every shift in the crystalline walls reinforced lessons that words alone could never convey. Humanity's strength lay not in force, but in its capacity to understand, adapt, and choose consciously. By evening, the chamber shifted once more, leading them to a balcony overlooking the hive city. From this vantage, the full scale of the civilization became apparent. The spires glowed with life, the inhabitants moved in patterns of precision and purpose, and the energy of the hive flowed visibly, like veins of light across the planet. Elias felt a sense of both awe and humility. Humanity had encountered great civilizations before, but nothing like this. A society where intelligence, beauty, and purpose were inseparable from life itself. "You have begun to see," the queen said, her presence calm but commanding. "Not all of your kind could survive this stage. Most would panic, attack, or flee. You adapt, you observe, you understand. That is why you are here, Elias Marlowe." He felt the weight of her observation, not as a threat, but as recognition. He had realized that the queen's fascination with beauty, with perception, was a mirror for humanity itself. What they saw in her reflected what they could achieve: clarity of mind, courage in action, and empathy in thought. Mara turned to him quietly. "Sir, she's testing more than us, isn't she? She's testing what humans can do when faced with the unknown." Elias nodded. "Exactly, and if we pass, the knowledge and alliance we gain will be invaluable, but failure, we can't even imagine the consequences." The queen is not cruel, but she is uncompromising. She measures truth, and truth cannot be hidden. Night fell over the hive, though night on this planet was unlike any Earth night. The sky pulsed faintly with shifting energy patterns, reflecting the hive's constant, conscious awareness. The team retreated to their quarters, exhausted, minds racing with the day's lessons. As Elias lay on his cot, staring at the softly glowing walls, he reflected on the events. This world, this hive, and the queen herself represented challenges humans had never faced. Intelligence here was alive, fluid, adaptive, and integrated with every aspect of existence. To succeed, humanity could not rely on instincts alone. It had to rise to the level of conscious understanding, courage, and empathy. He whispered quietly, almost to himself, but loud enough for the queen to hear if she chose. "I understand now. Beauty is not what you look like. It is what you represent, what you teach, what you inspire." A pause followed, and though no sound came from the queen, he felt a subtle resonance in the air, a recognition, perhaps even approval. It was a small victory, but meaningful. The trials were far from over, and yet he felt that humanity had already begun to leave a mark on this alien consciousness. Sleep came slowly, but when it did, it carried dreams of glowing chambers, living corridors, and the queen herself, her gaze calm, patient, and endlessly observant. Elias knew that the next day would bring further challenges, more tests designed to probe the very essence of what it meant to be human. But he was ready. In this hive, on this alien world, humanity was not merely surviving. They were being understood, measured, and perhaps for the first time, truly recognized. The day began with a soft, vibrating hum that seemed to travel through every bone in Elias' body. It was a reminder that the hive and the queen herself never truly slept. The team assembled at the chamber where the previous trials had concluded, their movements cautious but purposeful. The air pulsed with a low, continuous resonance, and the crystalline walls shimmered faintly, casting shifting patterns of light across the floor. Elias studied the queen from a distance. She remained seated upon her throne, her form elegant, her silver eyes tracking every motion of the humans. There was a curiosity in her gaze now, deeper than before, as if she were trying to discern not just their reactions, but the essence of their species, the instincts, the fears, the courage that made humans who they were. "You have passed the first trial," she said in her resonant voice that echoed directly in their minds. "But understanding alone is not enough. To truly survive and thrive among us, you must recognize the nature of connection, of trust, and of moral choice. You will face challenges that demand your intellect and your heart in equal measure." Elias felt a shiver of anticipation. The previous trials had tested observation, courage, and perception. Now it seemed the queen intended to test something more intangible, the essence of human morality. The chamber shifted again, the walls stretching outward and upward, forming a vast open arena. In the center, a projection appeared. It was a simulation, yet lifelike in every detail. He and his team saw themselves standing on the edge of a crumbling canyon. Across the divide were the creatures of the hive, some moving toward them with what seemed like intent, others remaining still. The queen's voice resonated in Elias' mind. "Here you will act not for survival alone, but for understanding. You must decide. Do you act selfishly, or do you risk yourself for others?" Elias stepped forward, heart pounding. The simulation was flawless, so real that he could feel the heat from the canyon floor, hear the wind rushing past, and sense the creature's presence. Each member of his team was presented with a challenge that mirrored their own fears. Mara faced a chasm too wide to leap, while another crew member confronted a swarm of alien predators designed to react instantly to aggression. "Observe first," Elias instructed, "then act. Fear is natural, but clarity is our ally." Mara hesitated, but Elias reached her side. "Trust what you know about yourself," he whispered. "Trust me." In response, the swarm paused, tilting their heads as though considering the human presence. Mara moved carefully, deliberately, and the simulation shifted, providing a safe path forward. Elias noticed that the queen's projections reacted not to strength alone, but to the intent behind each action. Aggression or panic caused danger to intensify. Calm, thoughtful action allowed progress. Hours passed as the simulation tested each crew member individually and collectively. At every step, Elias emphasized observation, teamwork, and honesty. Every moment of hesitation or dishonesty resulted in subtle corrections from the hive, the terrain shifting, creatures appearing or withdrawing, and the environment itself responding to emotional states. "You see clearly, yet that is only part of the trial," the queen's voice said. "You must also act with empathy and foresight. Do you value the lives of others over your own survival?" Elias reflected on the question. It was easy to act bravely when one was alone, but to act for others required foresight, restraint, and courage. He realized that this trial mirrored the greatest challenges humanity faced in its history, moments when the right choice demanded risk, sacrifice, and moral clarity. At one point, the simulation presented a scenario where Elias alone could secure the safety of the crew by activating a shield that would trap him on the canyon floor. The air around him thickened, pressing down like invisible hands. The creatures of the hive watched silently, their presence undeniable. Every instinct told him to survive, but every principle he held urged him to protect his team. He reached out and activated the shield, bracing himself as the environment shifted violently. Mara and the others crossed safely, and Elias felt the subtle pulse of the simulation adjusting in acknowledgement. He had chosen humanity over self-interest, courage over instinctual fear. The queen observed from above, her posture still and commanding, yet Elias could sense approval. "Few act without thought of self," she said. You have begun to understand that true strength is not merely physical but moral. That is the essence of your species' potential. As the simulation ended, the team found themselves standing again in the open arena. The crystalline walls pulsed brighter, reflecting a resonance that seemed to echo their collective effort and understanding. The queen descended from her throne, moving with the same elegance and grace that had first captivated Elias. "You have learned to act with clarity, with empathy, and with courage," she said. "But there is more to beauty than intellect and morality. There is the beauty of choice, the beauty of recognition, and the beauty of connection. You will now face the trial of perception, not just of the world around you, but of the beings who inhabit it and of yourself." The walls of the arena dissolved, revealing a vast landscape beyond the hive. Rolling fields of bioluminescent flora stretched as far as the eye could see. The plants reacted to the humans' emotions, growing brighter with joy, dimming with fear, and shifting unpredictably with uncertainty. The queen's advisors guided them silently, yet every movement was observed, measured, and recorded. Elias walked forward, feeling the pulse of the planet under his feet. He reached out to a glowing plant and felt a warmth that seemed to flow into him, responding to the honesty and calm he projected. Mara followed, laughing softly as the plants shifted and glowed more vividly. They discovered that the flora was alive, intelligent in its own way, and attuned to the truth of those who moved among it. "You see now," the queen said, her voice gentle, "that perception is more than observation, it is recognition. To see beauty, to see truth, you must perceive with mind and heart together. Humans often fail because they see only the surface, only the form. Few see the essence, the intent, the courage." Elias thought of the queen herself. Her form was unlike anything human, yet he had already recognized her beauty, not in the sense of physical appearance alone, but in intelligence, intent, and presence. She was commanding, elegant, and terrifying, yet he saw a depth beyond the exterior. "This trial," he said quietly to Mara, "is about understanding, not just surviving, not just acting. It's about truly seeing in every sense of the word." The day stretched on, each moment offering new lessons in empathy, observation, and connection. The humans learned to navigate the fields of glowing flora, to act with intention, and to communicate with one another in subtle ways that mirrored the hive's own language of energy and movement. Every act of honesty, every moment of courage, and every display of selflessness caused the environment to shift, to respond, to recognize. As evening approached, the queen led them to a chamber suspended above the bioluminescent fields. The floor was transparent, allowing them to see the glowing plants below, and the walls were alive with shifting colors and patterns that reflected emotion and intent. "You have performed admirably," the queen said, descending to stand before them. Her gaze swept over each human, lingering on Elias. "Few of your kind possess the clarity, courage, and empathy required to survive and understand this place. You are remarkable, not for strength or weaponry, but for the essence you carry, the ability to act with thought, compassion, and recognition of beauty in all its forms." Elias felt a strange warmth in his chest. He realized that the queen's fascination with beauty was not superficial. It was a measure of perception, of the ability to see beyond instinct, fear, or prejudice. To recognize her beauty was to recognize the potential within himself and his species, the potential to act morally, intelligently, and courageously. Mara turned to him quietly. "Sir, she's not just testing skill or survival. She's showing us what humanity could be if we rise to the challenge." Elias nodded. "Yes, and we must not forget it. Every action, every choice we make shapes how we are perceived and perhaps how we perceive ourselves." The queen observed them in silence for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice carrying both authority and curiosity. "You have begun to understand that beauty, courage, and intelligence are intertwined. Few species grasp this truth, few act upon it. You have chosen wisely. That is rare, that is remarkable." As night fell over the hive, Elias and his team returned to their quarters. The bioluminescent fields outside shimmered under a sky alive with energy, and the air pulsed with the constant hum of the hive's life force. Sleep came slowly, but when it did, it brought dreams of corridors that shifted with thought, of challenges that tested morality and courage, and of the queen herself, her gaze calm, observant, and endlessly curious. Elias woke before dawn, reflecting on the lessons of the day. Humanity had survived trials before, but never like this. Never in a place where intelligence, morality, perception, and courage were tested simultaneously, where the consequences of action were immediate and visible, and where every choice was observed and measured by an alien mind of unimaginable sophistication. He whispered quietly, as if speaking to both himself and the Queen, "We are learning, not just to survive, but to understand. Not just to act, but to see clearly, to act wisely, and to recognize beauty where it exists." And somewhere deep within the hive, perhaps, the Queen acknowledged the truth in his words, not with sound, but with the subtle resonance of her presence, a recognition that human potential was unfolding before her eyes. The trials were not over, but Elias knew that humanity had already begun to leave its mark, not through dominance, not through force, but through courage, perception, and the moral clarity that defined their species. In this alien world, they were not just visitors. They were participants in a dance of intellect, empathy, and understanding, a trial that would shape not only their survival, but the very way the hive perceived humans for generations to come. Dawn arrived in the hive not with light, but with a subtle shift in vibration. The world itself seemed aware that the final trial was beginning. Elias Marlowe stood at the edge of the observation platform, staring down at the bioluminescent fields below. The glow of the flora pulsed faintly, as if sensing the significance of the day. His team gathered quietly behind him, each of them carrying the exhaustion of days filled with tests, challenges, and revelations. Yet in their eyes was determination, human determination, stubborn and bright. The Queen appeared at her throne, her presence commanding but calm, as always. She did not speak at first. Her silver eyes swept across the humans, taking in every detail of their posture, their breathing, their unspoken thoughts. Elias felt the weight of her observation, not as intimidation, but as acknowledgement of what they had endured, what they had learned, and what they had become. "Humans," she finally spoke, her resonant voice echoing in his mind, "you have shown courage, intelligence, and empathy. You have understood that beauty is more than form, that perception is more than observation, and that choice is the greatest measure of strength. But now, you will face the final trial. This will test your ability to act with foresight, moral clarity, and unity under the most extreme conditions." Elias nodded. "We are ready," he said, and he meant it. He felt the same pulse in his chest that had accompanied him since arrival, steady and alive. He knew that the trial would not be simple, but he trusted his instincts, his team, and the lessons they had learned from the Queen. The chamber shifted, reshaping itself into a vast arena that extended far beyond the previous trials. The walls dissolved into a panorama of alien landscapes, cliffs, oceans of strange, luminescent liquid, and massive spires rising like towers of light. The air thrummed with energy, and the Queen's advisors hovered at strategic points, watching silently. "You will face choices that affect not only yourselves, but the hive itself," the Queen said. "One wrong decision could harm life in ways you cannot predict. One correct choice could shape our perception of your species forever. Do not act lightly." A sudden pulse ran through the floor beneath Elias' feet. In an instant, the landscape shifted again, revealing a series of challenges. The first was a canyon split by a massive chasm, across which a group of alien civilians appeared to be trapped. The floor under their feet quaked, threatening to collapse. The humans could see the glow of the Queen's energy reflecting in their silver eyes, watching their every move. Elias did not hesitate. "We move together," he said. "Observe, act, and keep others safe." The first rule: no one is left behind. The team advanced carefully. Each step required calculation. One wrong move could send them tumbling into the chasm. The terrain shifted constantly, as if alive, responding to hesitation. But Elias led with quiet confidence, signaling Mara and the others to move with precision. When one alien tripped, Elias reached out instantly, catching them mid-fall. The glow in the flora pulsed brighter with each act of courage, each act of selflessness, as if the planet itself recognized their intentions. After rescuing the trapped beings, the next challenge revealed itself, a swarm of creatures designed to test instinctual reaction. They moved with incredible speed, responding immediately to aggression, yet halting when approached with calm observation. Most species would fight blindly, triggering the swarm to attack. Elias instructed his team to act slowly, predictably, and with intention. The swarm parted as they passed, recognizing the absence of malice. Elias realized that the Queen was testing humanity's ability to act rationally under threat, without giving in to instinct alone. Hours stretched as the arena shifted through successive trials. They navigated collapsing bridges, crossed fields of energy that threatened to overwhelm their senses, and solved puzzles that required both logic and empathy. In one scenario, a human crew member faced the option to save themselves or an alien child trapped under debris. Without hesitation, they chose to help the child, and the environment responded, stabilizing pathways for all to pass safely. The Queen observed, her expression inscrutable, yet Elias felt approval radiating in the resonance of her presence. As the final trial approached, the landscape transformed into a quiet valley filled with glowing flora, still and vibrant. At the center stood the Queen herself, her posture regal, her presence commanding yet calm. Elias and his team approached, aware that this moment was not just a test of action, but of understanding and recognition. "You have faced fear, danger, and moral dilemmas," the Queen said. "You have demonstrated clarity, courage, empathy, and unity. But now you must demonstrate comprehension beyond survival, the ability to perceive, to connect, and to recognize beauty not as form, but as essence." Elias stepped forward, feeling the weight of the Queen's gaze upon him. He understood fully what was being asked. Beauty was not just her appearance, though it was striking. It was her intelligence, her purpose, her ability to challenge and inspire. It was the hive itself, alive and responsive, teaching through action and observation. And it was humanity, the capacity to rise to challenges with courage, compassion, and understanding. He knelt, extending a hand toward the Queen. "I see you," he said quietly, "not just your form, but your mind, your intent, your essence. You are beautiful, not just in appearance, but in purpose and presence. And through understanding you, I see humanity's potential to rise, to act with thought, courage, and empathy in any situation." The Queen regarded him for a long moment. Then slowly, she extended a limb in acknowledgement, a gesture that radiated recognition. Elias felt the resonance shift subtly, a pulse of approval that ran through the valley and into the hive itself. The Queen's advisors moved closer, observing but not interfering, as though they too were acknowledging humanity's potential. "You speak truth," the Queen said. "Few of your kind could perceive beauty in this way. Fewer still could express it with honesty, courage, and understanding. That is why you are here. That is why you have been tested. You are not merely survivors. You are worthy of recognition." Elias rose, a profound sense of relief and accomplishment filling him. The trials had pushed them beyond limits, challenged their instincts, and demanded the highest qualities of human nature. And in passing, they had demonstrated that humanity could be remarkable, not through strength alone, but through intellect, empathy, courage, and moral clarity. The Queen stepped closer, her massive form both intimidating and awe-inspiring. Elias could see now the subtle details, the way her limbs moved with precision, the grace in every motion, and the intelligence reflected in her eyes. He realized that true beauty was layered, complex, and tied to understanding and recognition, not just outward form. "You have proven yourselves," she said, her voice resonant and calm. "Humans, you are fragile yet formidable. You act not through instinct alone, but through thought, compassion, and choice. That is rare, that is powerful, that is beautiful." Elias bowed slightly, acknowledging her words. "And your beauty," he said, "lies not just in form, but in understanding, in patience, and in the ability to teach without force. You have challenged us, guided us, and allowed us to grow. That is a beauty beyond measure." The Queen regarded him silently, then inclined her head slightly, an acknowledgement that was both simple and profound. The resonance of her presence filled the valley, as if the hive itself was approving of the human's actions. Elias realized that this acknowledgement was not superficial. It was recognition on a level deeper than words, deeper than thought. It was the understanding that humanity had risen to meet the challenge, and that in doing so, they had earned a place of respect among a civilization far more advanced than their own. The team gathered around Elias, sharing quiet smiles and nods. They had faced trials that tested every aspect of their being: observation, courage, empathy, morality, and perception. They had emerged stronger, not just as individuals, but as representatives of humanity, capable of understanding and connecting with life far beyond their world. The Queen stepped back, raising her limbs in a subtle gesture of closure. "Go," she said. "Carry this knowledge with you. Return to your world not merely as explorers, but as beings who have faced the unknown and proven your essence. Humanity is remarkable, and it is recognized here, in ways your species has yet to fully comprehend. Elias felt a surge of pride and humility. They had survived, yes, but more importantly, they had been understood, measured, and acknowledged. Humanity, he realized, had the capacity to impress even the most advanced civilizations, not through force, but through thought, courage, empathy, and moral clarity. As they prepared to depart, Elias looked back at the Queen one last time. "Yes," he whispered almost to himself, "you are very beautiful." The words were not meant as flattery alone. They were a statement of recognition, of understanding, of shared respect. And in that acknowledgement, he felt a connection that transcended species, a moment where human perception and alien intelligence met in mutual comprehension. The Odyssey lifted from the platform, ascending through the violet clouds, leaving the hive behind. Yet the lessons remained. Elias knew that the memory of this world, the trials, and the Queen would stay with him, and with humanity for a lifetime. They had been tested, challenged, and recognized. And in that recognition lay the truth of human potential, not just to survive, but to rise, to understand, and to see beauty in every form it might take. As the ship moved through the atmosphere, the hive below pulsed softly, almost as if waving farewell. Elias glanced at his crew, each of them carrying the same mix of awe, relief, and pride. They had faced the unknown, and they had not faltered. They had risen to a level that the Queen, and perhaps even the hive itself, had deemed worthy. For the first time in a long while, Elias allowed himself to feel fully human, resilient, perceptive, courageous, and connected. Humanity had been tested, and humanity had been seen. And that recognition was, in its own way, more beautiful than anything he had ever imagined.